Millionaire hires a call girl as wife at Gala to honor mom's wish. But her rule changes everything. Before we start, leave a comment telling us which city or country you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Now, let's get back to Ethan Carter. The chandeliers of the Waldorf Grand Ballroom glistened like frozen fireworks above the crowd. Golden light spilled across gowns worth more than most people's homes. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter mingled with the soft notes of a live string quartet, and every step across the marble floor whispered wealth. At precisely 8 p.m., every conversation faltered. Heads turned toward the entrance. And there he was. Ethan Carter, 32, self-made millionaire. The youngest CEO in Carter and Hale's 100-year history. Impeccable in a tailored midnight tuxedo, his dark hair slicked back, his jaw set in the same cold, impenetrable line he wore in every Forbes magazine spread. But tonight, there was something different. On his arm stood a woman no one in the New York elite had ever seen. Her crimson silk dress hugged every curve, catching the light with each step. A diamond choker glittered at her throat, too ostentatious to be old money, too perfect to be fake. Her lips were painted a dangerous shade of red, and when she smiled, it was as if she knew exactly how many people were watching. The whispers began instantly. Who is she? She's not from our circle. Oh my God. Is she? Ethan didn't slow. His stride was deliberate, a man walking straight into the lion's den. To his right, the Carter family board members stood in a tight cluster, champagne flutes trembling in manicured hands. And at the center of that group, seated in an ornate high-backed chair, was his mother, Eleanor Carter. Once the face of New York philanthropy, now frail but radiant. Her eyes locked on her son. She had begged him for months. Don't let me leave this world without seeing you happy, Ethan. I want to see you settled, married. And so here he was, with a wife. Or at least, someone playing the part. Her name, the one she'd given him, anyway, was Sasha Monroe. They had met exactly 4 days ago in a dimly lit lounge on the Lower East Side. He hadn't gone there to find her. She hadn't expected a proposition like his. But after one blunt offer and a sum that made her blink twice, she'd agreed. With one condition. A condition so specific, so oddly personal, Ethan had almost walked away. Almost. Back in the ballroom, they reached the center of the marble floor. Ethan stopped, tightened his hand around hers just enough to make the performance look convincing. Cameras flashed. Ready? He murmured without looking at her. Her smile didn't falter. Always. Across the room, an older cousin sneered, already pulling out his phone probably to text the rest of the family gossip chain. Sasha leaned closer, her breath brushing his ear. Your mother's watching every move. Let's give her the show she wants. She kissed him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The kind of kiss no proper Carter wife would ever initiate in public. Ethan held her waist, part of him irritated. Another part. Intrigued. From the corner of his eye, he caught his mother's reaction, not the shock he expected, but something else. Something softer. Then, just as quickly, her expression shifted, and Ethan saw it, a flash of recognition in Eleanor's eyes. Recognition. Of Sasha. He forced a polite smile for the cameras, but his pulse had quickened. Sasha kept her composure, whispering as they broke the kiss. Keep smiling, Mr. Carter. We have an audience. He played along, but inside, the questions were already building. How did his mother know her? Why did she agree to this arrangement so easily? And what exactly was that one rule she'd made him swear to follow? Tonight, the gala was just the opening act. The real game, whatever it was, had only begun. The music swelled again, but Ethan barely heard it. His mother's eyes were still fixed on Sasha, like she was trying to place a face from decades ago. Smile. Sasha whispered through her perfect teeth, her lips never breaking formation. If you don't, they'll smell blood. He adjusted his expression, a flash of charm for the cameras. You're enjoying this a little too much. Maybe, she said, eyes scanning the room. But you're paying me to play the role. I'm playing it well. Before he could reply, a man in a charcoal suit approached his Uncle Richard, chairman of the board. Ethan. Richard's voice was smooth, but laced with steel. And you must be Mrs. Carter. He didn't bother hiding the skepticism. Sasha extended her hand. "It's lovely to finally meet you, Richard. Ethan has told me so much about you." Ethan nearly choked. He had told her exactly nothing about Richard. But Sasha's tone was flawless, warm with just a pinch of flattery. Richard's handshake was brief, his eyes cold. "We'll talk later, nephew." He moved on, without another glance at her. As soon as he was out of earshot, Sasha smirked. "He doesn't like me." Ethan's voice dropped. "He doesn't like anyone who might interfere with his control of this family." A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. Sasha took one flute, turning toward Ethan. "So that's the game here? Power plays under crystal chandeliers?" Before he could answer, the MC tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for the annual Carter Foundation dinner." Ethan guided Sasha toward the front table, the one reserved for family and VIP guests. The stares followed them like heat. As they sat, Eleanor Carter reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. "Sasha, dear, have we met before?" The question landed like a drop of ink in water, spreading fast in Ethan's chest. Sasha's smile didn't falter. "I don't believe so, Mrs. Carter. But I've read about your work. It's inspiring." Eleanor's gaze lingered a second too long, like she was peeling back layers. Then she simply nodded and leaned back. The speeches began. Polite applause punctuating each one. But Ethan's mind wasn't on the program. He was replaying every second of that exchange. Halfway through the main course, Sasha excused herself to powder her nose. Ethan watched her weave through the tables, every male head turning slightly as she passed. Richard leaned toward him the moment she was gone. "Whatever stunt you're pulling, end it. Your mother doesn't need this embarrassment." "It's not a stunt," Ethan said evenly. Richard's smirk was pure condescension. "You think you're protecting her? You're giving the vultures a feast." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Stay out of my life." Before Richard could retort, Sasha returned, and with her, a ripple of murmurs across the ballroom. She wasn't alone. At her side was Daniel Hayes, an investigative journalist notorious for uncovering corporate scandals. Sasha slid back into her seat as if nothing was unusual. "Ethan, you remember Daniel?" "No," Ethan said flatly. Daniel's smile was all sharp edges. "We've never met, but I know all about you, and about Carter and Hale." Ethan's fingers curled around his fork. "Enjoy your evening elsewhere, Hayes." Daniel chuckled and walked away, but not before leaning in just close enough for Ethan to hear. "Ask your wife what she told me." Ethan turned to Sasha, his voice low. "What did you tell him?" Sasha met his gaze, unflinching. "Nothing you wouldn't want me to." But there was something in her eyes, not guilt exactly, but a weight, a warning. Dessert was served, toasts were made, but Ethan barely tasted a thing. When the evening ended, they stepped into the cool Manhattan night. The limo was waiting. Inside, silence wrapped around them like a second skin. Finally, Ethan broke it. "You're going to tell me that rule of yours. The one you made me swear to follow." Sasha turned her head. City lights flickering over her face. "No falling in love. That's the rule." Ethan laughed once, a dry sound. "That's easy." She smiled faintly. "You'd think so." The car rolled forward, but in Ethan's chest, something shifted. Not love, not yet, but the dangerous awareness of a game whose stakes he didn't understand. And across town, in a dimly lit newsroom, Daniel Hayes was already drafting tomorrow's headline. The limo slid to a stop in front of Ethan's penthouse tower, 30 floors of steel and glass jutting into the Manhattan night. Sasha stepped out first, the slit of her crimson gown catching the breeze. Ethan followed, nodding once to the driver before leading her through the marble lobby. The doorman, trained to ignore even the strangest sights, kept his expression neutral. The elevator doors closed behind them. Only then did Ethan speak. "Daniel Hayes doesn't just show up to a gala without a reason. You knew he'd be there." Sasha leaned back against the mirrored wall, arms folded. "Maybe I did, maybe I didn't." His jaw tightened. "I don't like games." Then you hired the wrong woman," she said, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut through the hum of the elevator. The doors opened to a vast penthouse, the city sprawled beneath floor-to-ceiling windows. Warm light glowed across sleek furniture and art pieces worth more than most people's homes. Sasha wandered in without waiting for an invitation, trailing her fingers along the edge of a black grand piano. Nice place. But you don't play, do you? Ethan closed the door. We're not here to talk about my hobbies. Start explaining. She turned to face him, that faint smile still in place. You want the truth? That would be a refreshing change. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor. I know Daniel because he once tried to help someone I care about. He failed. But he owes me. And I owe him a warning. A warning about what? Ethan asked. Sasha's gaze flicked to the skyline, as if weighing how much to reveal. About Carter and Hale. About someone in your circle who's not as loyal as you think. Before Ethan could press further, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number, he answered. A deep voice on the other end. Mr. Carter, this is Detective Alvarez with the NYPD. We need to speak. It's about your mother. Ethan's spine went rigid. What happened? Nothing fatal, Alvarez said quickly. But she was followed tonight. We caught the tail. And, well, it's complicated. Are you alone? Ethan's eyes flicked to Sasha. Number. Then I'll say this much. Keep your new wife close. And watch your back. The line went dead. Ethan set the phone down slowly. Looks like your timing isn't as coincidental as you'd like me to believe. Sasha didn't answer. She was studying him now, like she was the one trying to solve a puzzle. Do you trust your family, Ethan? More than I trust you, he shot back. She smiled faintly. Good. Keep it that way. Doe? The next morning, the tabloids exploded. Billionaire CEO stuns at Gala with mystery bride. The photos were everywhere, the kiss, the looks from the family, even one shot of Daniel Hayes speaking to Sasha. Ethan was in his office when his assistant buzzed in. Sir, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's a friend of your wife. He almost said no. Almost. But curiosity won. Send her in. Oh. The woman who entered looked nothing like Sasha. Older, mid-40s, dressed in a plain cardigan and jeans, but her eyes, they were the same sharp green. She didn't sit. My name's Claire. I'm Sasha's sister. And if you care about her at all, you'll get her out of this city. Ethan stood slowly. Why? Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. Because the people after her won't stop until she's gone. And if you keep her close, they'll come for you too. Before he could ask more, Claire pressed a folded envelope into his hand. Don't open it here. She'll know I came. And if she asks, you never saw me. She left without another word. Ethan stared at the envelope, his pulse steady but his mind racing. He glanced at the closed door, then at the skyline beyond the glass. Whatever Sasha's one rule was meant to protect, it was clear now it wasn't just his heart at risk. And somewhere in the city, a game was being played that he hadn't agreed to join. Ethan didn't open the envelope right away. Instead, he slipped it into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, the paper crisp against his chest like a silent dare. By the time he left the office that evening, the city was drowning in twilight that hour when Manhattan's glass towers caught the last streaks of gold before surrendering to neon. He walked into the penthouse to find Sasha barefoot in the kitchen, hair pulled into a loose knot, an open bottle of wine on the counter. She was slicing strawberries with the precision of a surgeon. You're home late, she said without looking up. Board meeting ran long, Ethan replied, shrugging off his jacket, careful to keep the left side, the one hiding the envelope, away from her view. She glanced at him over her shoulder, eyes scanning his face like she was reading the subtext. Rough day? You could say that. He poured himself a drink, watching her. You didn't tell me you had a sister. Her knife froze mid-slice. Didn't think it mattered. It does now, he said, voice level. She came to see me. Sasha turned slowly, the blade still in her hand. Claire was here? He nodded. Said if I cared about you, I'd get you out of the city. That there are people who won't stop until... Stop. The word was sharp enough to cut through the air. She set the knife down, wiped her hands on a towel. Whatever she told you, ignore it. Claire doesn't live in reality. Ethan stepped closer. Funny. She seemed pretty grounded when she pressed this into my hand. He pulled the envelope from his jacket. Sasha's eyes locked on it, and for the first time since he met her, her composure cracked. Don't. He held it between them. Then tell me what's inside. Her silence was answer enough. Ethan slid a finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. A grainy image of Sasha, younger, maybe 20, standing beside a man in a dark alley. The man's face was turned just enough for Ethan to recognize him. It was Richard Carter, his uncle. The back of the photo had 3 words scrawled in rushed handwriting. "He's not what you think." Ethan stared at the picture, the edges cutting into his fingers. "Explain." Sasha's jaw tightened. "Richard knew me before you did. Long before. And he's the reason I made you swear to that rule." "What rule?" Ethan pressed. "No falling in love," she said softly. "That's not an explanation," he shot back. Before she could answer, Ethan's phone buzzed. Unknown number again. He put it on speaker. Daniel Hayes's voice filled the room. "I warned you last night, Carter. You've got rot in your family tree, and it's coming for both of you." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You're going to start making sense, Hayes, or what?" Daniel cut in. "You think your money makes you untouchable? Check your company accounts. Start with the Zurich branch." The line went dead. Sasha's gaze was on him now, steady but unreadable. "He's not wrong. What are you talking about? Your uncle's been moving money offshore for years. I was involved, not by choice, and when I tried to get out, Claire helped me disappear, until you found me." All. Ethan felt the floor tilt under him. "So this whole thing, the gala, you was just, what? A trap?" Her voice dropped. "Number. It started as survival, but now—" She didn't finish the sentence. Ethan turned away, running a hand over his face. Outside the windows, the city glowed like a million false promises. Finally, he said, "If what you're telling me is true, then Richard's not just a thief. He's dangerous." Sasha stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, you don't know the half of it." Before he could ask, the intercom buzzed. The doorman's voice was tense. "Mr. Carter, New York PD is here. They have a warrant." Ethan exchanged a glance with Sasha and saw something in her eyes he hadn't before. Fear. The knock wasn't polite. It rattled through the penthouse like a warning shot. Ethan crossed to the intercom. "Send them up." Sasha grabbed his wrist. "Don't." He pulled free. "If they have a warrant, they're coming in either way." "No." 30 seconds later, 3 NYPD detectives stepped out of the private elevator, badges flashing in the low light. The lead, Detective Alvarez, was a tall man with shoulders like a linebacker and eyes that didn't blink enough. "Mr. Carter," Alvarez said, voice calm but carrying weight, "we have a warrant to search the premises in connection to an ongoing financial investigation." Ethan stepped aside. "You'll find nothing here that isn't above board." Alvarez's gaze slid to Sasha. "And you are?" "His wife," she answered without hesitation. One of the other detectives, a younger woman with sharp eyes, handed Ethan the warrant. "This isn't about you personally, sir. It's about Carter and Hale. Offshore accounts, Zurich." Ethan's jaw tightened. Daniel's warning echoed in his head. While 2 detectives began moving through the penthouse, Alvarez lingered. "We also have questions for Mrs. Carter." Sasha folded her arms. "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet," Alvarez said evenly. "But the name Sasha Monroe appears in some very interesting correspondence." Ethan stepped forward. "You'll talk to her with me present." Alvarez didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small evidence bag. Inside was a flash drive. "This was found on your office desk this morning before security hours. No one can explain how it got there." Ethan took the bag. The flash drive was plain, black, unmarked. "And what's on it?" Alvarez's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You tell me, Mr. Carter. Maybe it'll save us all some time." When the police finally left, leaving the warrant copy on the kitchen counter, Ethan and Sasha stood in silence. He held up the flash drive. "If you know anything about this—" "I don't," she cut in, a little too quickly. Ethan crossed to his office, booted up the secure laptop he kept offline for sensitive work. Sasha followed, arms wrapped tight around herself. The drive's contents were simple. 1 folder, 1 video file. Ethan clicked play. Grainy security footage filled the screen dated 6 years ago. It showed a dim warehouse, a table stacked with cash, and 4 men in suits. One of them was unmistakable, Richard Carter. Another was Sasha, younger, her hair shorter, but definitely her. She was counting bills while Richard talked to someone off-frame. The audio was faint but clear enough. "Richard, once this clears Zurich, we're untouchable." Sasha, "And if it doesn't?" Richard, "Then we burn everything." Ethan stopped the video. Sasha's voice was low. You weren't supposed to see that. You were part of it, Ethan said, not a question. I was there, that's not the same thing. Explain the difference to me. She stepped closer. I was working for him then. Not because I wanted to, but because he owned me. He had something over me, over Claire. I was the one who tipped the feds, but they never made the charges stick. And Richard made sure I disappeared. Ethan's mind raced. So why me? Why come back into the Carter world at all? Her eyes met his. Because I knew one day you'd be the only one who could take him down. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. You have 24 hours. Bring her to Pier 39. Come alone. Attached was a live photo. Claire, bound to a chair, fear in her eyes. Ethan showed it to Sasha. Her face went pale. This is Richard, Ethan said. Sasha nodded, voice trembling for the first time. And if we go, he won't let either of us leave. Ethan looked out at the glittering city beyond the glass. For the first time, the skyline didn't feel like power. It felt like a trap. The text sat on Ethan's phone like a live grenade. You have 24 hours. Bring her to Pier 39. Come alone. Claire's terrified face burned into his mind. Sasha paced the living room, her bare feet silent against the hardwood. He's not bluffing. If he has Claire, the clock's already ticking. Ethan stood by the window, jaw clenched. You said Richard owned you, that he had leverage. What was it? She froze mid-step. It doesn't matter now. It matters if we're going to keep you and her alive. Sasha's eyes flicked to his, something dark passing through them. Pier 39 isn't a meeting place. It's where Richard cleans up loose ends. Ethan turned from the window. Then we don't go there on his terms. She shook her head. You don't understand. Richard isn't just dangerous because of money. He has people. Men who've been with him for decades. You can't outmuscle them. Maybe not, Ethan said, his voice low. But I can outplay him. Before she could ask what he meant, Ethan grabbed his phone and dialed. Alvarez? It's Carter. You want your Zurich case? I'll hand you the head of the snake, but you move fast. Alvarez's voice was wary. What's your angle? My angle is staying alive. Pier 39, midnight tomorrow. Bring unmarked units and enough backup to shut down the docks. There was a pause. If you're setting me up, I'm not, Ethan cut in. But if you're late, there'll be 2 more bodies in the river. He hung up and turned to Sasha. We're going to give Richard exactly what he wants you showing up, but he's not going to see the rest coming. Sasha's arms tightened around herself. You're putting a lot of faith in a woman you don't trust. Ethan allowed a faint smile. I don't trust you. But I trust Richard to underestimate you. The next 24 hours blurred into preparation. Ethan moved money, called in favors, and dug through Carter and Hale, records Daniel Hayes had quietly sent over. Every file painted the same picture. Richard was bleeding the company dry, laundering through fronts in 6 countries. By sunset, Ethan and Sasha sat in the penthouse, a duffel bag between them inside, a mix of cash, a burner phone, and a small device Ethan refused to explain. You really think Alvarez will show? Sasha asked. He'll show, Ethan said. The question is whether he'll show in time. At 11:45 p.m., they pulled up near Pier 39 a black SUV. The air smelled of salt and rust. Sodium lights cast long, sharp shadows across stacked shipping containers. Ethan killed the engine. When we get out, stay close. And if things go bad, they will, Sasha said, pushing open her door. They walked toward the rendezvous point, a lone floodlight illuminating a stretch of cracked concrete. Richard was already there, flanked by 2 men in dark coats. Claire sat bound to a chair, a strip of duct tape across her mouth. Richard spread his arms like a host welcoming guests. Ethan, and my favorite runaway. How touching. Ethan's voice was steel. Let her go, Richard. Richard chuckled. You think I called you here to negotiate? Number, I called you here to choose. One of his men shoved Claire forward into the light. Leave her and walk away with your wife, or take her and bury them both. Sasha stepped forward. Richard, this ends tonight. Oh, it does, he said, his smile curdling. Just not how you think. From the corner of Ethan's eye, movement the glint of a scope in the shadows. Not Alvarez's men. Snipers. He realized too late. Richard had planned for the police. The second Ethan spotted the glint of the scope, his blood ran cold. Those weren't NYPD rifles. "Down!" he barked, grabbing Sasha's arm and yanking her toward the nearest shipping container. A gunshot cracked the night, echoing off metal walls. The chair Claire was tied to toppled sideways. She hit the ground hard, muffled screams under the duct tape. Richard didn't flinch. He just smiled wider. "You think I'd walk into a trap without a plan?" Sasha shouted from behind cover. "Richard, you're insane. There's no way out for you." "Oh, there's always a way out," Richard called back, signaling one of his men. Another gunshot rang out, this one closer. Ethan risked a glance around the container and spotted movement in the shadows beyond the pier. Tactical gear. Alvarez's team. They'd arrived, but they weren't moving in. Why? Then Ethan saw it, thin wires stretched between the pier supports, small blinking lights attached. Explosives. Richard had rigged the whole dock. He leaned toward Sasha. "If Alvarez's men rush in, the whole pier goes up." "So what's the play?" she asked. Ethan's eyes locked on her. "We get to Claire, we get her free, and we make Richard believe he's still in control." "That's a lot of we," she muttered. Another shot ricocheted off the container. Ethan ducked back. "You got a better idea?" She didn't. Ethan took a breath, then stepped out, hands raised. "Richard, let's talk!" Richard's eyes narrowed. "About what?" "About money. Zurich. I can get you the rest, but you have to let them go." Ethan tilted his head toward Sasha and Claire. Richard laughed, a dry sound. "You think I need your help? I already have everything I want." "Then why call me here?" Ethan pressed. Richard's smile thinned. "Because the only thing better than owning the Carter Empire is watching the last Carter heir burn." Before Ethan could answer, Sasha stepped out from behind the container alone, her hands also raised. "Sasha, no." Ethan started, but she cut him off. "Richard," she called, voice steady. "You still want me, don't you? Let Claire go, and I'll come with you. No cops, no mess." Richard's men exchanged glances. Ethan's heart pounded. What the hell is she doing? Richard tilted his head, studying her. "Why would I trust you now?" "Because you know I've never been afraid of you," she said. "And because if you kill me here, you lose your leverage." "Alive, I'm worth something. Dead, I'm just a body." A long pause. Then Richard nodded to one of his men. "Cut the sister loose." The man moved to Claire, slicing the ropes. She stumbled forward, nearly collapsing. Sasha took a slow step toward Richard, and that's when Ethan saw it, her hand, sliding into the slit of her dress, fingers curling around something small and metallic. She caught his eye for half a second. It was all the warning he got. Sasha lunged. A deafening crack split the air, followed by chaos shouting. Gunfire, Alvarez's men charging in. Ethan dropped to the ground, covering Claire as splinters of wood and shards of concrete rained down. When he looked up, Richard was gone. Sasha too, and the blinking lights on the explosives had turned red. The red lights blinked faster now. Somewhere under the pier, a faint beep, beep, beep picked up speed. Ethan grabbed Claire's arm. "Move!" They bolted toward the nearest stack of shipping containers. Alvarez's men were shouting orders, fanning out, trying to secure the perimeter without triggering the explosives. Claire's breathing was ragged. "Sasha, where is she?" "She went after Richard," Ethan said, scanning the chaos. Another gunshot cracked, and a spray of splinters burst from a crate inches from his head. He ducked, pulling Claire down with him. Alvarez appeared from the shadows, his face tense. "We've got eyes on some of the charges. Whoever wired them knew what they were doing. We can't disarm them in time." "How long?" Ethan demanded. 8 minutes, maybe less. Ethan's mind raced. "Then we don't need to disarm them. We need to get everyone off this pier now." Alvarez nodded, barking into his radio. Men began ushering civilians and officers toward the street. But Ethan wasn't moving. Alvarez grabbed his arm. "Carter, let's go." "Not without Sasha," Ethan shot back. Claire's eyes widened. "Ethan, if she's with Richard." "I don't care," he said, cutting her off. "She's not dying here." He took off toward the far end of the pier, the direction he'd last seen her. The smell of salt water mixed with gasoline hung heavy in the air. Past the last row of containers, he found fresh footprints on the damp wood, one set of heels, one set of boots. They led toward a moored cargo ship, its deck swallowed in shadows. Ethan climbed aboard, keeping low. Inside the ship's hold, he heard voices. "Richard, you could have run, Sasha. Why come back?" "Sasha, because you've been running my life long enough. I'm ending it tonight." Ethan edged closer, peering through a gap in the metal. Richard stood with his back to him, a pistol in hand. Sasha was 10 feet away, the small metallic object from earlier clutched tight, a mini flash drive. Richard sneered. "You think whatever's on that will save you? You forget who controls the narrative." Sasha smiled faintly. Not for long. She tossed the flash drive into the air. Richard's eyes tracked it just long enough for her to lunge. They collided, the gun going off with a deafening bang. Ethan charged in, tackling Richard into a steel wall. The pistol clattered away. "Go!" Ethan shouted to Sasha. "Get out!" But before she could move, a deeper, more ominous sound rolled through the ship. The beep from the pier had turned into a solid tone. Alvarez's voice exploded in Ethan's earpiece. 30 seconds. Richard grinned through bloodied teeth. "You're not making it out." Ethan slammed him against the wall again, hard enough to drop him. "Watch me." "Oh, one." He grabbed Sasha's hand, and they ran, pounding up the metal stairs to the deck. Claire was on the dock, screaming their names, waving frantically toward a police van. Ethan and Sasha leapt from the ship onto the pier just as the first blast tore through the far end. The shockwave knocked them flat, heat licking their backs. Debris rained down. A second explosion roared, swallowing the ship in a ball of fire. When the ringing in his ears faded, Ethan pushed up on one elbow. The pier was in ruins. Richard was nowhere to be seen. Sasha's hand gripped his. Her voice was hoarse. "It's not over." And in the distance, over the wail of sirens, Ethan swore he saw a shadow slip into the dark water. The smoke from Pier 39 clung to the skyline well into the morning. Helicopters circled overhead, the low thrum of their blades mixing with the chatter of news crews parked outside the NYPD barricade. Ethan sat on the back bumper of an ambulance, a blanket draped over his shoulders he didn't remember accepting. Claire was a few feet away, paramedics checking her vitals. Sasha stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the smoldering wreckage. Alvarez approached, his suit jacket streaked with ash. "You're lucky to be standing here, Carter." Ethan gave a humorless smile. "Not luck, timing. Call it what you want," Alvarez said, lowering his voice. "But the blast took out more than the pier. We found evidence in the wreckage shipping manifests. Offshore account ledgers, some with your family name all over them." Ethan glanced at Sasha. She didn't flinch. "I'm not going to pretend this doesn't make you both look dirty," Alvarez continued. "The press is already spinning it. Half think you're heroes. Half think you're cleaning up your own mess." "Which side do you believe?" Ethan asked. Alvarez's gaze was steady. "The side that gets me Richard Carter in cuffs. And right now, that's not the side you're on." Before Ethan could respond, a young officer jogged over with a phone in an evidence bag. "Sir, this was recovered from the water near the blast site. It's still functional." Alvarez handed it to Ethan. "Recognize it?" Ethan turned the phone over. The lock screen lit up a photo of Richard, grinning, arms slung around a younger Ethan at some long-forgotten family barbecue. A new message notification pulsed on the screen. "You can't kill what you can't catch. R." Sasha leaned in, reading over his shoulder. "He's alive." "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "And he wants me to know it." Claire stepped closer, her voice still shaky. "If Richard survived that, he's not going to hide. He's going to hit back." Alvarez crossed his arms. "Then you'd better be ready, Carter, because next time, I might not be able to keep you out of a cell." They were escorted to an unmarked car and driven away from the chaos. The city outside the tinted windows felt different now, colder, heavier. Back at the penthouse, Ethan poured 3 glasses of scotch and set one in front of each woman. "Richard's not just playing games anymore. He's telling us the next move's his." Sasha sipped hers, her eyes sharp. "Then we take that move away from him." Claire frowned. "And how do we do that?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the small flash drive Sasha had risked her life to keep. "We use this." Sasha hesitated. "Ethan, what's on that drive will burn him, but it might burn you too." "Then we both burn," he said. "But he goes first." Before anyone could reply, The penthouse intercom buzzed. The doorman's voice came through, strained. "Mr. Carter, there's a package here for you. No return address. Marked urgent." "Oh, quote." Ethan exchanged a glance with Sasha. "Send it up." A few moments later, the elevator chimed. A plain cardboard box sat alone inside. He carried it to the kitchen island, sliced it open. Inside was a single black envelope and a small, blood-stained cufflink. Sasha's face drained of color. "That's Richard's." Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a Polaroid photo Alvarez, bound to a chair, a bruise swelling his jaw. On the back, in block letters, "Trade for the drive. Midnight. Alone." Ethan set the photo down, the weight of it settling like stone in his chest. This wasn't just about family anymore. Richard had just made it personal. The photo of Alvarez lay in the center of the kitchen island, like a silent ultimatum. The blood-stained cufflink glinted under the overhead light, a cruel reminder of whose game they were playing. Sasha broke the silence first. "If you go, you're walking into a trap." Ethan poured himself another scotch. "If I don't, Alvarez dies." Claire's voice was quiet but firm. "You owe him your life, Ethan. But you also owe this city Richard's head. That drive is the only way." He downed the drink in one swallow. "Richard knows I can't trade it. That's why he's daring me to." Sasha stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then don't give him the real drive." Ethan studied her. "You want me to fake it?" "It buys us time," she said. "Long enough to figure out where he's holding Alvarez. Once we have him, we burn Richard publicly." "Dacres." Claire crossed her arms. "And what if Richard can tell it's a fake before we get Alvarez out?" Sasha turned to her. "Then at least Ethan isn't walking in empty-handed. He'll still have leverage." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You're awfully eager to control this plan." Sasha's tone cooled. "Because I've survived Richard before. You haven't." The tension between them thickened until Ethan cut in. "Enough. I'm making the call." "Oh." He set the flash drive on the counter, then pulled a second, identical one from a desk drawer. "This is the fake. Sasha, you're with me. Claire, you stay here. If something goes wrong, you take the real drive straight to Alvarez's second-in-command." Claire shook her head. "I'm not sitting this out." "You are if you want Alvarez alive," Ethan said, his voice leaving no room for argument. By 11:40 p.m., Ethan and Sasha were in a black sedan heading toward the rendezvous point. Richard had chosen an abandoned textile mill on the edge of the Hudson. The streets grew quieter, darker, the air colder with each passing block. They pulled up 2 blocks away. Ethan killed the headlights and scanned the building through a pair of night vision binoculars. 1 guard at the front, 2 on the roof. No sign of Alvarez. Sasha adjusted the strap on her small shoulder bag. "If this goes south, we split up. Don't try to play hero." He gave her a look. "And leave you in there with Richard? Not happening." Inside, the mill smelled of damp concrete and rust. Their footsteps echoed as they crossed the cavernous space. Richard stepped out from the shadows, his smile sharp and wrong. "Right on time." Ethan held up the drive. "Where is he?" Richard gestured to a steel chair in the center of the room. Alvarez sat in it, wrists bound, a fresh cut bleeding along his temple. "Release him first," Ethan said. Richard's smile didn't waver. "You're not in a position to negotiate, nephew. Hand it over." Sasha moved to Ethan's side, slipping her hand into her bag. Ethan passed her the fake drive without breaking eye contact with Richard. She stepped forward, holding it out. "Here, let him go." Richard took it, turning it over in his hand. His eyes flicked to Sasha, and something like amusement crossed his face. "You always were good at playing both sides." Before Ethan could react, Richard tossed the drive to one of his men. "Check it." The man plugged it into a laptop. Seconds later, his expression hardened. "It's empty." Richard's gaze snapped back to Ethan. "You really thought you could outplay me?" He raised his hand, and from the shadows, 2 more armed men emerged, weapons trained on Ethan and Sasha. Richard's voice was ice. "Change of plan. You're both staying." And then, from the far side of the mill, a crash. Claire, bursting in with a pistol, flanked by 2 of Alvarez's undercover officers. Gunfire erupted. Ethan lunged for Alvarez, cutting the zip ties with a blade from his pocket. Sasha grabbed the nearest guard's arm, slamming his weapon to the ground. Richard vanished into the chaos, his laughter echoing off the mill's walls. When the shooting stopped, Alvarez was free, The officers had the surviving guards in cuffs, and Richard was gone. Again, Sasha wiped blood from her cheek, breathing hard. "This isn't a win. He wanted this to happen." Ethan met her eyes. "The next time, we take the fight to him." From outside, the wail of sirens grew louder, and in Ethan's gut, the certainty settled in. Richard wasn't running. He was circling. The old textile mill was still echoing with gunpowder and shouts when Ethan, Sasha, Claire, and Alvarez stepped out into the cold night. Police lights flashed red and blue against the wet asphalt. Alvarez's men were hauling the captured guards into vans, but Richard was, as always, a ghost. Ethan leaned against the black sedan, rubbing the back of his neck. "We had him, twice in 1 week, and he still walks away." Alvarez wiped dried blood from his temple. "You're not the only one he's been watching. My unit's been compromised for months. Someone's feeding him moves before we make them." Claire's voice was tight. "An inside leak?" "Has to be," Alvarez said. "And it's someone who knows the Carter family inside out." Ethan's gaze shifted to Sasha. "You've been in his world longer than any of us." Her arms folded. "Careful where you're pointing that." Ethan didn't look away. "You're telling me you've got no idea how he's a step ahead?" Sasha stepped closer, her eyes flaring. "I'm telling you I'm not the enemy here. But if you keep treating me like one, maybe I should be." Alvarez cut in before it escalated. "Look, this isn't the place. Get some rest, both of you. Tomorrow we regroup." They drove back to the penthouse in silence. The city's skyline glittered like nothing had happened, but Ethan could feel the walls closing in. Inside, Claire went straight to the guest room, muttering about a shower. Ethan poured 2 drinks, slid one to Sasha. She didn't touch it. "You think I'm his leak? I think you know more than you're saying." She let out a bitter laugh. "You want the truth? Fine." She reached into her bag, pulled out a crumpled photo. She tossed it on the counter. It was Sasha younger, in a black dress, standing next to Richard at some lavish party. His arm was around her waist. "That was the night I signed my first contract with him," she said flatly. "Not a business contract. A deal to keep someone I loved alive." Ethan's voice was low. "Who?" Sasha's jaw tightened. "My brother. He owed money to the wrong people. Richard paid it off. In exchange, I worked for him. Did whatever he wanted. For years. And now? Now my brother's dead, and Richard's still collecting." Before Ethan could answer, Claire emerged from the hallway, hair damp, face pale. "We've got company." She stepped aside, revealing a man in the doorway, one of Alvarez's junior officers, holding an envelope. "Found this taped to the door downstairs," the officer said. "Figured it was urgent." Ethan took it, tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 words in Richard's handwriting. "Ask her about Paris." Sasha's glassy-eyed reaction was immediate, a flicker of fear she couldn't mask. Ethan's voice sharpened. "Paris?" She shook her head. "Not now." "Oh, no," Ethan said, slamming the paper onto the counter. "Now." Sasha's lips parted, but whatever words she was about to speak were drowned out by a sudden thump from the penthouse balcony, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Claire gasped. "Someone's here." Ethan reached for the pistol he kept in the kitchen drawer, moving toward the sound. From the shadows of the balcony, a figure stepped into view, tall, soaked from the rain, and grinning. It wasn't Richard. It was a stranger, holding Richard's wallet. The man stepped fully into the light, rainwater dripping from his leather jacket onto the penthouse floor. He tossed Richard's wallet onto the counter like it was nothing. Ethan kept the pistol leveled at him. "You've got 10 seconds to explain, before I assume you're here to finish the job." The man's gaze flicked to Sasha, and a crooked smile tugged at his mouth. "Still working the Carter circuit, I see." Sasha's face went rigid. "Julian." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You know him?" Julian chuckled. "We've crossed paths. In Paris." That one word landed in the room like a grenade. Ethan shot Sasha a look. "Paris. Like the note." Sasha didn't answer, her jaw tight. Julian raised his hand slightly. "Relax, Carter. I'm not here for you. I'm here because Richard's made enemies in more than one country, and I happen to be one of them." "Then why bring me his wallet?" Ethan asked. "Because it was in his jacket, the one I pulled off a body floating down the Hudson an hour ago." Claire's breath caught. You're saying Richard's dead? Julian's smile widened. I'm saying someone who looks an awful lot like your uncle isn't breathing anymore. Ethan's mind raced. Where's the body now? Gone, Julian said simply. Someone else took it before I could get a clean look at their face. But they left this. Oh, he reached into his jacket and slid a folded piece of paper across the counter. Ethan unfolded it to find a grainy photograph, Sasha, standing beside Richard in front of a cafe with a Paris street sign in the background. She was laughing. Ethan turned the photo toward her. Start talking. Sasha's voice was low. It was 5 years ago. Richard sent me to Paris to entertain a client. But it wasn't about business. He was laundering money through an art gallery there, and he needed someone to get close to the gallery owner. That someone was me. Claire frowned. And Julian? Julian's smirk faded. I was the gallery owner's bodyguard. Until I wasn't. Ethan glanced between them. Meaning what? Meaning she convinced me to turn on my boss, Julian said, his tone sharpening. Cost me my job, my passport, and almost my life. All to protect Richard's operation. Sasha met Ethan's eyes. I didn't have a choice. Julian leaned on the counter. You always have a choice, ma chérie. You just chose wrong. Ethan lowered the pistol, but his voice was ice. If you're here to settle old scores, get in line. But if you've got information on Richard, now's the time. Julian reached into his jacket again and pulled out a small flash drive. This was in his wallet. Whatever's on it scared the man who took his body enough to leave me alive. That should tell you something. Ethan took it, feeling the weight of it in his palm. You have a safe place to stay? Julian's grin returned. I never stay anywhere safe for long, but I'll be in touch. He moved toward the balcony, pausing just before stepping back into the rain. Oh, and Carter, if Richard's really dead, you might want to watch your back. Power vacuums don't stay empty. The door slid shut behind him, leaving only the hum of the city below. Claire broke the silence. So, what's on it? Ethan looked at Sasha. We find out now. Minutes later, the flash drive was plugged into Ethan's secure laptop. Files spilled across the screen: bank transfers, offshore shell companies, coded messages. And at the bottom, one file named simply SC Contract. Sasha's face drained of color. That's me. Ethan opened it. The document laid out a 10-year agreement between Richard Carter and Sasha Claire Dubois, granting Richard not just control over her career, but legal rights to certain services in exchange for the protection of unnamed family members. Claire whispered, You signed this? Sasha's voice cracked. I told you. I didn't have a choice. Ethan closed the laptop. Then we make sure no one else ever does. Oh, but in his gut, one question burned hotter than the rest. If this contract was here, what else had Richard hidden in Paris? The contract still glowed on the laptop screen when Ethan shut the lid. Sasha's eyes stayed fixed on it, as if she could burn the words off the page just by glaring. That file isn't the only thing Richard hid, she said quietly. Ethan leaned forward. Paris. Her head snapped up. We can't. We have to, he cut in. If Julian's right, whatever Richard kept there was worth killing over. And if he's dead, someone else will be trying to grab it. Claire stepped in from the doorway, arms folded. And you think hopping on a plane in the middle of an active investigation is smart? It's the only way to stay ahead, Ethan said. Alvarez can't move on this without tipping off the leak inside his unit. We go quiet. We go now. Within 12 hours, the three of them were on a red-eye to Paris. Julian had sent a single text before they boarded. Rue des Écluses, Saint Martin. Midnight. Come alone. The flight was silent, except for the low hum of the engines. Claire kept her eyes closed, pretending to sleep. Sasha stared out the window, city lights shrinking beneath them. Ethan finally broke the silence. Tell me what's waiting for us. She hesitated. It's not a vault, it's a gallery. Richard used it to launder money through forged art. But the real secret wasn't the paintings, it was the ledger. Every name, every transaction, every bribe. Ethan's brows knit. And you know where it is? Her voice dropped. Yes, and so does someone else. They landed at Charles de Gaulle under a gray Parisian sky. By nightfall, they were slipping through narrow cobblestone streets toward the address Julian had given. Rue des Ecluses Saint Martin was quiet, the air thick with the smell of rain on old stone. A dim street lamp flickered above a heavy wooden door, marked only by a brass number plate. Julian was leaning against the wall, cigarette between his fingers. "You made good time," he said, crushing it under his heel. "You said midnight," Ethan replied. "I lied," Julian smirked. "Better you're early." He unlocked the door, leading them into a narrow hallway that opened into what looked like an empty art gallery. White walls, bare frames, the faint scent of varnish. Sasha scanned the room. "The ledger's not here." Julian grinned. "Of course not." Richard wasn't stupid. He kept it in the one place. Even his enemies wouldn't look under the floor of the wine cellar. They descended a spiral staircase to a damp, low-ceilinged cellar lined with dusty bottles. Julian pried up a section of rotting wood, revealing a small steel lockbox. He handed Ethan a key. "Your inheritance, Monsieur Carter." Ethan slid it into the lock, when a sharp click echoed through the cellar. 3 men in dark coats stood at the bottom of the stairs, pistols drawn. The leader, a tall man with a shaved head, smiled coldly. "Bonsoir, Sasha." Her face went pale. "Luke." Ethan's grip tightened on the lockbox. "Friend of yours?" Luke's smile widened. "We worked together once, until she stole from me." Julian muttered under his breath. "This is why I told you Paris was trouble." Luke's gaze shifted to the lockbox. "Hand it over, and maybe I let you leave with all your fingers." "Oh." Ethan stepped forward. "Or maybe you walk away before I make you regret pointing a gun at me." Luke laughed. "You think you're the first Carter to threaten me?" Richard made the same mistake. The air in the cellar was heavy. The standoff balanced on a knife's edge until Sasha moved. She stepped past Ethan, eyes locked on Luke. "You want the box? Take me instead." Ethan's head snapped toward her. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer, just kept walking toward Luke. Luke's grin sharpened. "Always the martyr, Sasha." In one motion, she pulled a small blade from her sleeve and slashed at the nearest gunman. The cellar erupted in chaos, gunshots, shouts, bottles, shattering. Ethan tackled Luke, the lockbox clattering across the floor. Julian dove for it, grabbing it just before a bullet slammed into the wall inches from his head. By the time the dust settled, Luke and his men were gone, and so was Sasha. Only the faint echo of her voice lingered in the damp air. "Find me before he does." The wine cellar still smelled of gunpowder and spilled Bordeaux. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, staring at the empty space where Sasha had been moments ago. Julian shoved the lockbox into his hands. "She knew what she was doing," Ethan snapped. "She just handed herself over to a man who wants her dead." Julian's tone was cold. "And if you run after them right now, you'll join her in a shallow grave. Open the box." Ethan hesitated, then dropped to one knee beside the splintered floorboards. He slid the key into the lock. It turned with a dull click. Inside, under a layer of dust, was a leather-bound ledger and a small velvet pouch. Claire, who had followed them down, peered over his shoulder. "Please tell me that's more than grocery lists." Ethan opened the ledger. Page after page was filled with names, dates, amounts, millions of dollars moving through shell companies and offshore accounts. Some entries were circled in red ink. Julian leaned in, whistling low. "Half the Paris elite. And look there." Ethan's eyes froze on a familiar name. Carter Holdings. The amounts listed were staggering, but it was the note scribbled in the margin that made his blood run cold. "Transfer control to Luke, upon termination." Claire frowned. "Termination? As in death?" Julian's jaw tightened. Richard wasn't just laundering money, he was setting up a succession plan, and Luke was his chosen heir in Paris. Ethan closed the book with a snap. "Then Luke doesn't just have Sasha. He's got a claim to my family's entire empire." Julian picked up the velvet pouch and emptied it onto the dusty floor. A single brass key fell out, engraved with the numbers 38 to 7. Claire picked it up. "Looks like a safe deposit key." Julian nodded. "Bank codes. My guess? Whatever's in that box makes this ledger look like pocket change." Ethan grabbed the key and slid it into his jacket. "We find the bank, we get the contents, and we use it to trade for Sasha." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Or we use it to destroy Luke outright." Claire crossed her arms. "Or both." "But how do we even find him?" Julian smirked. "I might know someone who knows someone. An hour later, they were in a dim cafe near Canal Saint-Martin. Rain tapped against the window as Julian slid into a booth across from a wiry man with sharp eyes. The man sipped his espresso without looking up. "If I tell you where Luke is, I want immunity." Ethan leaned forward. "From what?" The man smiled thinly. "From everything." Julian tossed him the brass key. "Consider it a down payment." The man caught it, rolled it between his fingers, and finally spoke. "Luke's holding her at an old freight yard outside the city. Security's heavy. You go in loud, UD." Ethan's voice was flat. "Then we go in smart." Back at the gallery, they spread a map across the counter. Julian pointed to the freight yard layout. 2 main entrances, both guarded. Sniper nests here and here. Sasha will be inside the central office. It's the only place dry enough to keep her breathing. Claire traced a route with her finger. "There's a drainage canal here. If we come in from the water, we can bypass the main gates." Julian looked impressed. "Not bad for someone who's never done this before." Claire's mouth tightened. "Don't get used to it." They geared up quickly, dark clothing, suppressed weapons, comms in their ears. By midnight, they were crouched in the shadows of the drainage canal, the freight yard looming ahead. Ethan's voice came low over the comm. "We get in, get her, and get out. If Luke sees us coming, it's over." They slipped through the water, emerging behind a stack of rusted shipping containers. Guards patrolled just yards away. Julian took out the first with a swift chokehold. Ethan signaled Claire to move, and they ghosted across the yard toward the central office. Through a grimy window, Ethan saw her Sasha, tied to a chair, a bruise darkening her cheek. Luke stood over her, speaking softly, almost affectionately. Ethan's stomach twisted. Julian whispered, "We take the shot now." Ethan shook his head. "Too risky. We get closer." "Oh." They inched toward the door, hearts pounding, when Luke suddenly turned toward the window. His eyes locked on Ethan's. The corner of his mouth curled into a slow, knowing smile. Luke's smile through the grimy glass was not surprise, it was invitation. He lifted his hand in a slow, mocking wave, before turning back to Sasha. Whatever he said made her flinch, and then he reached into his coat pocket. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. "He knows we're here." Julian cursed under his breath. "We move now, or we lose her." Claire's voice came sharp through the comms. 2 guards just turned the corner. We've got 30 seconds before we're surrounded." Ethan's jaw clenched. "On my mark." Julian slipped to the side of the door while Ethan braced himself against the frame. Claire kept her position as lookout, eyes scanning the yard. Ethan kicked the door in. The first guard inside went down with a single shot from Julian's suppressed pistol. Luke barely flinched, he was already pulling Sasha's chair toward him, a knife in his other hand. "Careful, Carter," Luke drawled. "One wrong move and she bleeds before you blink." Ethan's gun never wavered. "Let her go now." Luke tilted his head, studying him. "I'll make you a trade. That key you're carrying for her." Ethan didn't answer, but Julian muttered in his ear, "He's bluffing. He won't kill her, not yet." Luke's knife pressed against Sasha's collarbone. "You have 5 seconds to decide if your family's little empire is worth her life." Sasha's eyes locked on Ethan's. No fear, just a silent plea. Ethan's grip on the pistol tightened. He could feel the brass key's weight in his jacket pocket, the one thing that could expose Luke's entire operation. 3, 2. Luke began to count. Ethan made his choice. He tossed the key across the floor. It skidded to a stop at Luke's feet. Julian hissed, "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan ignored him. "You've got what you want. Now give her to me." Luke smirked, bending to pick up the key. "Always wondered if you had Richard's spine. Turns out, you have his weakness instead." As he straightened, Ethan moved. A single, sharp shot rang out, not at Luke, but at the rope binding Sasha's wrists. She tore free, spinning out of Luke's grip just as Julian lunged. The room exploded into chaos, gunfire, shouts, the crash of overturned furniture. Claire burst through the doorway, dropping one of the outer guards with a clean shot. Luke ducked behind a desk, firing wildly. Julian dove for cover, returning fire. Ethan grabbed Sasha, pulling her toward the exit. "Move." They sprinted into the yard, bullets sparking off the containers around them. Claire covered their retreat, backing toward the drainage canal. They were almost clear when Ethan heard Luke's voice echo behind them. "Carter, this isn't over. I'll burn it all before I let you win." And then a single, muffled boom. The freight yard erupted in a fireball, heat slamming into their backs as they dove into the water. Metal screamed and twisted, the central office collapsing in flames. When they finally crawled out onto the far bank, gasping, the yard was an inferno. Sasha's voice was hoarse. "You gave him the key." Ethan shook his head, water dripping from his hair. "Number I gave him a copy." Julian stared at him. "When?" "Back at the gallery," Ethan said. "The real key's still in my safe in New York, and now Luke thinks he's won." Sasha managed a faint, tired smile. "Then let's make sure he regrets it." In the distance, sirens wailed, but in Ethan's mind, the real sound was Luke's promise, still ringing. "I'll burn it all before I let you win." Ethan knew exactly what that meant. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a war.